Truth is, I thought it mattered. I thought that
money
mattered. But does it bollocks? Not compared to how people matter.
Welcome, Mention and other fine folks, to the Sunday Dispatch of the Black Letter, where we contemplate thoughts worth thinking as we try to navigate through the upside-down, topsy-turvy world we find ourselves in, seeking greener pastures on the other side, hopefully coming out healthier, wealthier, and wiser. And to do that, we need to find some signposts along the way that give us a hint of where we are and the direction we're traveling in. And so we're going to look at some things today. We're going to look at household debt. We're going to look at the potential for bank collapse or other issues of that nature. Jerome Powell is also suggesting we will never go back to the same economy, so we'll take a look at what that means. And with that in mind, we'll take a look at what the Great Reset is. I know I've spoken about this on my channel several times. There's a lot of misinformation out there about the Great Reset. So we'll go straight to the horse's mouth to actually find out what exactly it's all about. And I think it's well overdue. It's part of a fourth turn in a crisis, and I think we will be better for it on the other end generally. Okay, first up, Reuters. U.S. household debt rises above pre-pandemic levels due to mortgages. Of course, you know, most things are in an asset bubble at the moment, including stocks, bonds, and real estate. And here we have a prime example. People have been buying houses like crazy, at least those that still have jobs and could afford it. And of course, this is increasing their debt level, which is not a good thing as we head into this prolonged recession or depression. U.S. household debt rose in the third quarter due to an increase in mortgage balances as consumers took advantage of low interest rates to buy homes and refinance loans, according to a survey released by the New York Federal Reserve on Tuesday. Total household debt increased by $87 billion to $14.35 trillion in the 3 months ending September 30th. The total debt load has now surpassed the levels seen in the first quarter of this year. Households reduced their credit card balances for the third straight quarter, but the $10 billion decline during the third quarter was only a fraction of the $76 billion drop in the second quarter. Altogether, consumers shed $120 billion in credit card debt in the first 3 quarters of 2020, cutting debt by 13% from the end of 2019. But of course, they increased it by $87 billion for their household debt in mortgages and refinance loans. So actually slightly increased by about $1 billion debt overall. You can see the credit card debt drops, and really recently it was as high as it's been since 2003. So this is obviously not good news, especially as we're in a prolonged recession at the very least. That's why I keep saying, you know, we need to pay down debt, squirrel away savings, because I don't think the difficult times are behind us yet, but at least it's trending in the right direction, although it is starting to slow down, it appears like. We'll have to keep our eyes on that, see what happens. Then from Zero Hedge, Softbank CEO warns of Lehman-like crisis that could crash global economy. On Tuesday morning, Softbank CEO Masa Son warns about the possibility of an impending disaster that could tank global markets in the coming months as the second wave of the virus pandemic intensifies. In the short run, I'm pessimistic, says Masa Son. Dealbook editor and CNBC host Andrew Ross Sorkin tells Son during the virtual conference that he's usually the most optimistic investor in the room, though Son's attitude appears to have drastically shifted in recent times, maybe due to SoftBank's terrible performance after losing $3.7 billion after months of wild success in creating the most significant gamma squeeze on record, which led to a massive late August melt-up in FAAMG names. There's also been news of an exodus of executives at Son's investment fund called Vision Fund, so no wonder he's feeling pessimistic. But I think there is some salad to this dressing, if you will. There could be some major company that could crash and produce a domino effect of financial turbulence around the world, he said. He said it could be just one bank causing a Lehman-like crisis. Son's warning comes as Nasdaq futures have stalled for nearly 4 months. A second coronavirus wave is ravaging the West, and double-dip recession fears are surging. You can see here the Nasdaq futures. This is looking parabolic. Certainly, I'm not sure what this is. This is monthly. Yes, it's a monthly Nasdaq 100. We look at the dot-com bubble here. I mean, this looks very much echoes the same. So I think if I'm in the stock market sort of testing certain assets and certain stocks just to see if there's any room there for a little bit of increase. And so far, I'm finding this top here seems to be a bit choppy. Now, can it go higher? Of course, and so that's why I'm in. But I certainly have, stops just to catch me instead in case things really start turning south. So there you go, another banking crisis. I think that's as potential and likely as anything, really. CNN Business, we're never going back to the old economy, Fed Chairman says. That's Jerome Powell, obviously the Fed Chairman of the United States. We're not going back to the same economy. We're going back to a different economy, Powell said, echoing comments he made at the European Central Bank's Forum on Central Banking last week. The pandemic has accelerated ongoing trends, including the increasing use of technology, automation, and telework, Powell said last Thursday. And while these changes will be beneficial for some, they will hurt certain groups in the short term. On Tuesday, Powell also reiterated that people in lower income jobs hadn't recovered as much as others, and that workers in the service industry might need more help going forward. And of course, he's part of the problem as to why this bifurcation of wealth has happened, although he doesn't really have many other tools. Fiscal stimulus, i.e. money coming from the federal government to people, comes from the government. All he can do is print money and buy up certain types of assets. So obviously that's what they've been doing, while Congress and the rest twiddle their thumbs and disregard the needs of the public and the income that they need. However, with all that said, I think the Great Reset is coming. I think part of that is going to be potentially a UBI, or Universal Basic Income. And there's a lot of, fear-mongering out there by some quarters about the Great Reset. And all these crises, these turnings, if you will. I encourage you to read a book called The Fourth Turning by Neil Howe and William Strauss. It was written in 1997, but it suggests that we're in the fourth turning, which is a crisis moment, and should end by around 2030. But I think in the interim, it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. But nevertheless, on the other side, things come out a little bit more equitable, more hopeful, and with large changes to our institutions and ways of doing things. And with that said, I think what will happen here is that the Great Reset is going to create all sorts of different ways of dealing with the economy. I think one of those could be the UBI for most folks, because if you read Jeff Booth's book, The Price of Tomorrow, which talks about deflation, I think there's great forces there that are deflationary, particularly technology, and it's putting a lot of people out of work, and I don't think there'll be new jobs enough and coming quickly enough for pick up the slack. So we're going to have to do something like that. And additionally, I think what's going to be coming of it is a CBDC, a central bank digital coin. And of course, that's a double-edged sword. It'll allow people to earn, to be given money directly by the federal government or the Federal Reserve in this instance, sort of cutting out the banks and the middlemen and deposit right into your account. It'll also allow for negative interest rates, which means that if you don't spend your money, they'll start to erode it through negative interest rates. It also allows for a more easy tracking of money and where it goes, etc., etc. That's good for them, and it allows a much more focused tracking of your population, of course. And hopefully the Supreme Courts in the Western world will ensure that there's proper protections and privacy rights with that access. Nevertheless, I think it's going to be good for us overall and create a more equitable world. But let's actually look what the Great Reset is all about. So here at the World Economic Forum, instead of going to third parties who are going to be fear-mongering about how this is big government and big brother, etc., let's actually see what they're talking about in the World Economic Forum. Now is the time for a great reset, and you can have a read of the full article if you'd like, and also the rest of the blog that they have here to understand where they're coming from. I don't think it's some big globalist agenda, frankly. I think it's folks in power that are realizing the necessity for creating a more equitable and just world and society. And anyway, let's have a read here. COVID-19 lockdowns may be gradually easing, but anxiety about the world's social and economic prospects is only intensifying. There is good reason to worry. A sharp economic downturn has already begun, and we could be facing the worst depression since the 1930s. But while this outcome is likely, it is not unavoidable. There are many reasons to pursue a great reset, but the most urgent is COVID-19, and these sorts of things, these fourth turnings or this big reset, usually happen during moments of crisis, which of course we are currently in, I would argue. This will have serious long-term consequences for economic growth, public debt, employment, and human well-being. According to the Financial Times, global government debt has already reached its highest level in peacetime. Moreover, the unemployment is skyrocketing in many current countries. All of this will exacerbate the climate and social crises that were already underway, and frustrations over social life or social ills like rising inequality are intensifying, and we're seeing that as well. And these are issues that need to be addressed, as they talk about here. Left unaddressed, these crises, together with COVID-19, will deepen and leave the world even less sustainable, less equal, and more fragile. Clearly, the will to build a better society does exist. We must use it to secure the great reset that we so badly need. That will require stronger and more effective governments, though this does not imply an ideological push for bigger ones. The Great Reset agenda would have three main components. The first would steer the market toward fairer outcomes, and they talk about what that might be. The second component of a Great Reset agenda would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. And then the third and final priority of a Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social changes. So if you really read it, there's a lot of good that could potentially come out of this. Of course, it's all in how it's built out, etc., etc. But I think it's a very, very important. And they talk about all sorts of different issues here, as you can see if you want to spend some time reading that. Anyway, there you have it, folks. A very interesting article. It comes right from the folks who are going to be pushing for this Great Reset, rather than third parties who are there to clickbait and to fearmonger. And I don't think this is something to be feared. In fact, this is something to be encouraged and something we need, frankly. We need stronger governments that can lead us and create a more equitable society, because clearly capitalism has had some arguably great successes, but has also created much of the problems that we have in the world right now, specifically inequality and wealth inequality. All right, so you have the markets up slightly. I think they were looking down in futures last night, but now they bounced back just a little bit. S&P 500 up 0.21%, NASDAQ 100 up 0.13%, Dow 30 up 0.37%, and the Russell 2000 up 0.12%. So just sort of might end up being a flat day, these small increases in the morning, but we'll have to see how that ends up. And here's gold, also still consolidating, dipping slightly, and now at around $1,877, just sort of consolidating as it has done for several months now. Probably will until we have some more corrections in the market, I imagine. And of course, much of what gold does, silver follows, and so silver is also consolidating here about the $24.45 range. So really not much going on with the precious metals, but it seems like, as we've seen over the last few days, that, or the last few weeks actually, that cryptocurrencies are sort of detaching from any other asset classes, and they've been on quite a bullish run. Let's see if that is continuing. And yes, it is continuing. You can see the market cap here at $506 billion. First time we've seen $506 billion. That's $500 billion, folks, at least in U.S. money, or I should say U.S. number counting. 2.9% increase in the past 24 hours, and 6,007 coins for you to ignore. Bitcoin dominance is increasing here at 65.5%. So Bitcoin certainly is leading this bull charge, and up, wow, over $17,000 right now at 17,880. Could soon be reaching 18,000, and then the all-time high. I think we'll certainly get there by the end of the year if this continues. Now, last 24 hours, it's up 5.5%. Ethereum up 1.6%. The rest of them not doing much, actually down, except for Chainlink at 4.3%. So very interesting to see. Bitcoin certainly dominant and continuing its lead. So good news for those of us who got in earlier. But I think at this stage, probably still an opportunity to get in. As you know, I foresee $100,000 worth of Bitcoin by the end of next year. Whether that will happen or not is another thing. Of course, none of this is financial advice. And if you are going to be getting into Bitcoin, then you should be aware that it can have 30 to 40% drawdowns even during a bull market. So that's something to be aware of. When I purchase Bitcoin, it's generally just for the long term. I'm holding through thick and thin. I see it as a store of value, digital gold, if you will, allowing me to keep savings that won't be eroded by inflation if it comes to that, and will just help to, I think, save my income and the savings I have over the long term. Anyway, there you have it. Good news for cryptocurrencies currently. So you'll remember when we were looking here at Softbank CEO Masa Son that he was talking about the potential there could be some major companies that could crash. It could just be one bank causing a Lehman-like crisis. So I thought that would be an interesting question for the 8-ball economist, our trusty sidekick, the online oracle. Could we have a Lehman-like crisis by the end of 2021? You may rely on it. Okay, so according to the online oracle, Masa Son, CEO of SoftBank, is correct, and that there will be a Lehman-like crisis by the end of 2021. I think there's a good chance of that myself. Now, what that will look like, it'd be hard to say, but I think once these bankruptcies start really taking hold, probably early next year, into the middle of next year, I think we will see continuing difficulty in the markets and in the banking system. So something to be vigilant about. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate you and spending the time here. I hope you're having a good week. It's Wednesday, so we're midweek, hump day, and closing out the week here soon. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me. Remember to pay down debt, squirrel away some savings, stay healthy, and remember to remain vigilant, and above all else, spiro.